What's in a Name? A podcast by any name would still sound as lame, but somehow We Manage sounds pretty cool, right? We've changed our podcast name to reflect that it's the two of us, new parents, lifelong learners, former managers, chatting about software engineering, leadership, processes, culture, and hiring. In today's episode, we discuss the controversy of whether an office location is in fact necessary for innovation. To join the conversation, follow us on Twitter at GuildmasterC, check out our blog at www.guildmasterconsulting.com/blog, or subscribe to and comment on our YouTube channel. Simply search Guildmaster Consulting in quotes to find us. If you have any questions or topics for our podcast, don't hesitate to reach out to hi@guildmasterconsulting.com. We would love to hear from you. Hello and welcome to Somehow We Manage, the software engineering podcast to help managers scale their teams and to help engineers scale themselves. Today we're going to be talking about working remotely and the relation of brainstorming to innovation in the remote space. We are also going to start with a question from last time, actually, from our earlier podcast, The A is Silent. We had a question from a listener. Are you ready, John?
Yeah.
You want to hear this? Okay. So, how often do you think the volunteering part of a vault is likely to be used? It seems like it might only happen when a company forms or after a reorg when there's lots of people getting matched to lots of roles. In practice, I've not been asked what I want to do because there was something that needed to be done the most and I was the only one free at the time. When someone is hired, they are probably already being thought of for a particular role or project too. Great question.
Sure. So the vault is about how to do some of that reorging. It's when multiple people have claims to a certain role or task. Though in the case mentioned in the question, I guess I have to answer the question with another question a little bit. In a lot of cases, it's not so much that somebody's free, it's that they're the most free, in that they probably have some responsibilities, but something came up, and they have the perceived least number of responsibilities. Now, that perception could be wildly off, and you can often go into a lot of offices and software shops and find that one person is doing 90% of the various discovery and design and coding activities, and everybody else is just kind of milling about. Work tends to flow to the most busy person because they're the most likely to say yes. This isn't a fair way to do it, and of course Vault can help there. You also, I think, implied in the question, there's some worries about being too reactive. I think a great deal of our efforts do need to be held in reserve for reaction to what the market's going to throw at us. But I think intentionally holding people in reserve or working on what we would call second seashell or interruptible tasks is how you do that. You don't just, oh my God, we got to get somebody on this.
You got to hire someone.
Yeah.
And throw them at this problem.
Yeah.
Let's get more people on it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that just kind of shows a lack of planning. And again, I have to kind of look at current events in the world. We know that top-heavy, detailed timetable plans where everything has to go at a certain place is poor planning. That is not good planning. Good plans are robust to violations of their assumptions. When various things go wrong, the plan stays firm somewhat, which, again, would lead to things like, oh, I'm going to hold a certain number of my engineering hours in reserve. We can keep those folks busy doing something that's easily interruptible and maybe work down some small tech debt here and there. And that way, when something comes up, I will have a workforce ready to take it on.
So you're saying that in an ideal situation, there's some slack in the plan, which might account for not just the marketplace throwing things at you, but also retention issues. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a sudden vacuum in a skill set, and it's not wrong to hire for a particular skill set and then to want to use that person as soon as possible when they come into the company. And yet you're saying that there should be a certain slack so that that person can have onboarding, can have some considerations about their growth before they're just hurled against their volunteerism at something.
Yes, though I would say this isn't the ideal world, this is the effective world, right?
Oh.
This isn't something like, if we only had so many resources, we could do this. This is the reason you don't have more resources is that you are not doing this. This benefits the company. This isn't something to spend your treasure on. This is something that will generate treasure for you.
Okay. All right, I'll think about that some more, because, part of me was also thinking it was a little perfect world scenario to have your first step be volunteering, whether in conflict resolution or in role conflict resolution. But we'll think more on that. I want to stick with that question. Thanks again for the question. And thanks, John, for causing us to think about it. So now we're going to get into something that actually appeared in our recent blog post, and that is a study published by CNN. And John, talk us through the summary of it. I don't want to step on your shoes here.
So CNN published an article, Virtual Meetings Can Crush Creativity, in which they cited a study. Let me see. Virtual communication curbs idea generation. This study was in Nature this year by Melanie S. Brooks and Jonathan Levov. So this study, of course, you can take from the title, Virtual Communication Curbs Idea Generation. The study purports to try and show that when we're using virtual tools like Zoom, it makes us less creative. And then, of course, CNN jumps that and kind of leverages that even more. Like, this is crucial to the nation. Virtual meetings can crush creativity. I think the background context here is that these studies or these sorts of articles are exactly what's being passed around in anti-remote circles, in circles that are trying to say we all need to go back to the office, pandemic's over. Now, of course, vaccine rates are high, case numbers have plummeted. We're a little worried about this BA2 variant, but for the most part we have effective treatments. So is it time to go back into the office? I would argue no, obviously, because I think we have run into a culture shift where we realize we are actually, a lot of us are more effective remotely. And if you understand how productivity works, you won't be surprised by that. And if we want to talk about how to make us more effective in the office, it's applying that same research that would conclude why we're so effective at home. But I want to jump into the Nature research really quick.
Yeah. Take us back to the original study.
So they, to draw their conclusions, they set up a simple experiment where two people are working together to come up with creative uses for a Frisbee. My impression is that this is kind of a standard way of measuring creativity and innovation. And they found that when the two people were in the same room, they generated 20% more ideas than people who were remote. They were working over Zoom. And let's put that number in I want to put that number in context, because that sounds impressive. But we're talking about a brainstorming exercise over 5 minutes. And so if you want to get, I believe that the folks working together in the same room were generating something like 1.5 ideas per minute, and the folks working remotely were something like 1.3 ideas per minute. So that's honestly all we're talking about here. We're not talking about the end of the world. We're not talking about the end of sustainable competitive advantage in our disruptive innovation. We're talking about 20% more ideas in 5 minutes on uses of a Frisbee. Now, other research has tried to imply that this exercise is predictive of general innovation. And I'm not going to stake my claim on trying to disrupt that. I believe that this is probably a good correlate of innovative and creative thinking. What I want to go into, and we do this further in the blog, is talk about, is this material? And is there kind of
20% more for 5 minutes.
For five, yeah.
Like, how much is 20% of 5 minutes is a minute?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that's substantive.
Yeah, exactly. Is it substantive given the cost? Because the cost of working with two people in the room is those two people's commute, right? And the average commute is something like 27 minutes one way. So we're talking about roughly an hour to take from the employee so that we can get 20% more innovative ideas in the framework where they are using collaboration to innovate, right? They have to be working together to innovate for this to take effect. I won't argue two people trying to come up with ideas for a Frisbee doesn't predict general creativity in a collaborative setting. I will argue that's all it predicts. We're talking about collaboration. We're not talking about individual creativity or individual innovation.
Or even different kinds of brainstorming where you would think of something individually before coming together. I mean, there are different tactics.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So roughly, to take advantage of this, you need to be spending about 5 hours at work doing collaborative, innovative activities every day. Yeah, exactly. More meetings before the cost due to the commute is covered. Nobody does that.
Makes sense.
I mean, you're lucky if you do 1 hour of brainstorming a week. Not lucky. You're a aficionado of brainstorming if you do 1 hour brainstorming a week. So I don't think that this is material. But let's actually take a step towards what you were saying, Ash. Is brainstorming even all that useful? And in Harvard Business Review, Camara Premuzic in 2015 talked about the research showing that brainstorming is a useless exercise and we need to stop doing it. It descends from just one guy's opinion back in the 1960s that said you got to pull everybody into a room, all ideas are good ideas, we get them up on the board, and you just go. There are a lot more effective ways to generate ideas, namely individuals trying to generate ideas and then coming together to share them, which I think you were alluding to. So if you want 20% more productive ideas in a setting that is not useful, sure, you can pay attention to this research, but this isn't a useful setting. Now, in the CNN article, as well as the Nature study, they talk about how so many ideas come from teams, and that is true. But anyone who's worked in a team and come up with ideas knows that many of those ideas did not come up in a brainstorming session. You probably had the idea in the shower, and you went to Slack, or you brought it to the next meeting, and you're like, what do you guys think about this? Right. And that's where ideas come from. So are we less creative or innovative working remote? I don't think so. There's a lot to be said about the productivity benefits of working remote, and a good chunk of those come from the commute itself. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So if you're asking your employees to commute in, you're going to have to be making that up to them somewhere else, either in their compensation or something else. It is not free labor. We might all say it's free because we're so used to it, but ultimately I think companies are having to pay something like 20% higher wages to get their workers back in. That's how much workers are valuing remote work. And all of these theories on why the office is more productive don't hold any water. We just talked about the office is not more innovative or creative because why would it be? It's the same people. Most of our ideas, we come up with them individually. But I've heard this cited a lot. Oh, the water cooler effect. Everybody gets around the water cooler and they share their ideas and you know, that's where all the good ideas happen. The water cooler effect came from an article in Psychology Today by Alex Pentland. And all that research showed out of his research at MIT is that small talk matters and that connectedness matters.
Right.
It didn't...
Yeah.
They only saw people co-locate around the water cooler because the company they were researching had a water cooler. They didn't compare remote to local.
Right.
They just saw where a local shop, a place where people came in the office, they just saw where they congregated.
Right. So it could be like a water cooler channel in Slack.
Exactly. It could be a water cooler channel in Slack. It could be your off-topic channel. Like, you have to acknowledge the importance of off-topic chat.
Yeah.
In Slack. I think that would be the application of the water cooler effect to a remote office. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have, summits where you pull everybody in, though there's a lot of benefits to a full remote workforce in terms of meeting, because you can meet anywhere. You don't have to meet at the one office headquarters, so that could be fun. Like, there are benefits, but there is no water cooler effect that literally requires a water cooler. There's no gathering around the coffee machine effect that can't be, or it has been shown not to be replicable using something like the Donut application or Slack, or just intentionally trying to get people together to get to know each other. Game nights.
Yeah. Can I interject real quick? So I happen to be reading, I'm in this group dynamics course for social work, and it was going into task groups and how to make them more productive. And it too went into brainstorming and the uses of it. And it's like, oh, it's very helpful. All these social science studies suggest that it's helpful for generating quantity of ideas. But then, they also confess, well, your ideas not necessarily as a group going to be better than the best idea of one individual, right? And it's not necessarily going to be helpful to create this quantity of ideas if it's going to skew towards certain talkative members, who have psychological safety and those that don't, right? So that seems to me to be the interesting thing about the water cooler study, is like it was increasing probably some psychological safety because you got to know people in a casual way, and gave you a kind of camaraderie and trust maybe that would be conducive for brainstorming. Not that the study ever went so far as to say that, but I could see that maybe being efficacious. Even still, they suggest that brainstorming's not really structured enough, or that it doesn't... in itself create the kind of environment where innovation happens. That really the innovation happens when there's trust, when there's a healthy team. Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. What it reminds me of is, you got to have you might have ideas locked up inside people's heads. They're either not feeling psychologically safe or they're not talkative. But I think ultimately human beings are the idea generators as much as I want to focus on the team, it's the individuals that have the idea. Now, they may be bad ideas and need a team to tailor them to be better.
Right.
But it's the individual. And there's a lot to be said of just an evolutionary model of where do good ideas come from. If you look at how the physical world has generated creativity, right? It's through our genes and evolution. And so are you allowing people to take risks like mutation?
Mutation, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Are you allowing people to change the little things here and there? Are you giving them autonomy to occasionally go astray? Are you making sure they're sharing the results? That's mating or sexual selection, right?
Producing.
Yeah, exactly. Are they going outside of their tribal groups,
right?
Or their herds and getting more idea material from others? Are you getting outside training and outside consulting and sending people to conferences to bring back all of this really interesting material that can be churned and turned into some new idea?
Right, and do you have diverse teams? Because that's something else that this studies have borne out. Is like, you're not actually going to have innovation without diversity. You're going to have this easy formation of the team. There are payoffs for a homogenous team in the very early stages because they can get to a place of some trust maybe a little bit earlier. But again and again, it shows like you're not actually getting the innovative ideas because you don't have diverse experiences.
Yeah.
sorry, that's probably for another topic. But I mean, that's the thing is, it's so funny that studies are focusing so much on the remote, like the environment, and not thinking about the people.
Well, that leads...
Like, why not go into, like, the diversity of the team, and how do we attract more diverse people? Maybe it means we have to have a remote situation because our landscape of where our headquarters is not very diverse.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I just think it's such a weird angle to focus on. I don't know. The office versus Zoom.
I 100% agree. But they don't even have the physical environment to stand on here. Open offices are notoriously bad for productivity. They make people feel uncomfortable. They make people feel insecure because your back's open to everything. They're loud and disruptive. And again, to a topical point, open offices increase chances of communicable diseases. So even not in a pandemic, you have more sick time because you have an open office.
Yeah, there's a threat to productivity and innovation.
Yeah. I mean, that is in a study in ergonomics in 2015. Open offices are just a really bad idea, and they have taken over. So it's really ironic that the defense of the office space right now that's going on, that we need to get people back in the office space. We have the worst office spaces we've ever had.
Yeah, so that's something I've always found interesting is that, when I was going through Scrum training, it's all about co-location, right? And there was this premium placed on sitting next to your team and being right there so you can overhear the chat that happens, right? And you can't overhear things in Slack or something, right? You have to be physically co-located in order to get the gains of an agile team. To me, it seems so interesting to fixate on that instead of thinking about how do we develop truly cross-functional teams, right?
Yeah, because you're still sitting with developers, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe you've gotten a client in there.
Yeah, progressive organization. Maybe you have the client, or you have some of your marketing and product people sitting next to you. But I don't know. I think it has to go back to what's at stake in it for the companies and the people funding the research. I don't know. I don't want to go into too much of a cynical place, but it's just, I don't know. It seems like the companies benefit, right, from having that real estate. Surely not. Who wants that on their books? I don't know. I'm thinking of companies who bought into new cool office spaces, made those big old bullpens, right?
Yeah.
And then got shut down because of the pandemic. And did they see a hit in their productivity?
I mean,
if they did, is it something they could even suss out from general anxiety from living? But sorry, I don't know. It's so interesting to me that agile project management and some of these recent studies are focusing so much on co-location.
I think there's a lot to be said about the Agile Manifesto was a bunch of guys getting together in a ski cabin.
Yeah.
Right? And so isn't this great? We should always work like this.
Co-located in a ski cabin.
Yeah. But they left out the context where they were all consultants and authors thinking about this stuff nonstop.
Were their clients there?
No, exactly. The clients weren't there.
Were they getting feedback in the ski cabin from their clients?
This was a beneficial brainstorming meeting. Sure, they were able to bring all that individual work together.
Yeah. And
then they attributed, this is really innovative, to the place they were at, which goes to show you that maybe you could change where the summits are, but you're not going to be as effective if you do this all the time. This is kind of like the XP model. We like peer review, let's pair program. Wasn't this session where we all got together so productive? We should always be together. It doesn't work because you needed that balance of individual deep work flow time to develop the ideas, to have something to present to the group and then discuss.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is the importance of diversity, the diversity of experiences that you have in your day and how you secure the different kinds of work, and the diversity of your people.
Diversity is the raw material of innovation.
Yeah. Say that again?
Diversity is the raw material of innovation. If you look at it as the genetic model, as the evolutionary model, the more diverse information you're bringing in terms of that DNA, through life experiences and education and industry experiences and personalities and approaches, everything you can get is going to give you a broader base which you can pick and choose from to start building some new idea.
And when brainstorming works, it's because it looks something like that entropy, or like that messiness of bringing in more and more and more information, just accounting for more and more. And in the study, there seemed to be this suggestion that you could only get that if you were in a space together, because if people were meeting remotely, they'd get too fixated on their camera or the faces in front of them, like that they were bringing in less information because they became too focused on the Zoom mechanism.
That was one of the conclusions the study drew, is that some of the differences they saw were in trying to pull in information from the room versus the people on Zoom were just kind of focusing on each other. Which I would just say, if you're trying to be innovative, or if you're trying to do a brainstorming exercise over Zoom, turn off the cameras.
Yeah, or like members can go on walks, right? While they're attending the meeting.
Lean into remote. There's all kinds of things you can do remotely that you can't do when you're all in a meeting room. That, as you say, going into walks in nature is also shown to increase creativity.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on a point you mentioned earlier, Tom DeMarco and Peopleware.
Love that book.
His argument on why do we keep buying these open offices is that basically physical plant or facilities or real estate is a different line item on the books, as you say, than engineering. And so they want to keep cost per square foot down as low as possible, and all the productivity benefits to having high cost per high square feet, which would lower raise the cost per square. They want to keep they just want to keep costs low. They want to keep costs low. All the productivity benefits of having larger facilities and more capitalized facilities,
maximizing space,
maximizing privacy, walls, doors, things we normally associate with a building. They get hit with those costs, but they don't get to account for any of that productivity benefit. So it goes again towards this lack of holistic or globalized optimization for the business because we aren't doing cross-functional work. Now, there are some more cynical viewpoints that people like open offices because you can create artificial scarcity. There are still usually a few closed offices, and those go to high-ranking, very important people. And certainly there's a power trip if everybody is out there with their heads down and headphones on, and you walk out of your office and you think, I'm in charge. Now, I don't know that there's any science that I'm aware of that can point to kind of doing this for the power differential, but it's an interesting story to tell for sure.
Well, no, I mean, because I remember maybe this was in that same ergonomics study, just how important having closed offices are. Like, the bullpen's really only helpful as a bullpen if it's a gathering space, right? Like a conference room or an open area that people can come to when they're ready to have those conversations and they need someone to bounce ideas off of. It's not really a bullpen. It's more like I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like a chicken coop or something. Yeah. when you're just forcing everybody's desks to be in that big open space.
Yeah, it's a factory farm.
A factory farm, exactly. Yeah, that's how I always felt. I mean, it's nice to be accessible, but I'm someone who cannot have deep work if it's loud.
Yeah.
And in some of these really hip industrial buildings where offices are located are so loud.
Yeah.
I love the aesthetic, but I hate the aesthetic.
The noise aesthetic.
Yeah, exactly. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on in this blog that you wrote, or in the articles that you were reading before we wrap up here today, because I see are a little bit stirring.
You won't get me saying this much, but one of the few things I'll credit Steve Jobs for here is that the balance between introversion and extroversion, collaboration and individual time seemed to be something important to him. And he did try to emphasize, at least at some point in Apple's trajectory, I don't know how their building is now, private offices as well as public meeting spaces, to have that collaborative time as well as that individual time. And to be honest, if you look at their campus, they also did their best to maximize window space and light coming in and natural space. So it does look like they're trying to practice what they preach there.
Yeah, that is nice. It takes me back to like the marketplace model or the forum, when the ancient Greek philosophers came, but like it was often a courtyard in the middle with these individual units on the outside. And so I think people need that kind of setup, right? Where it's intentional space, and there's diverse space. It's not all homogenous. Everyone's in this supposed flat organization imposed by these cubicles. Like, flat organization isn't just how you structure your office, right? Yeah. Especially if you have those private offices for individuals. Yeah. It says something if that's your flat organization.
Everyone is
your
equal.
Architecture lies.
Yeah, everyone is equal, but some are more equal than others.
Right. It's an interesting implication of Conway's Law, which we can talk about some other time when we think of software architecture reflecting your teams. All right, well, that's it for today. Let's go get our little bit up from her nap. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us here on Somehow We Manage. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to our podcast on Google Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or Amazon Music. You can also check out our podcast on our YouTube channel. Simply search Guildmaster Consulting in quotes and you'll find us. Better yet, share about us on Twitter or LinkedIn. We need your help in the fight to make engineering jobs suck a little less. Get the word out and tag @GuildmasterC.